So here, sorry. Here we have a picture from a baile funk, a party that happens in favelas here in Rio de Janeiro. And when it's songs, we can find Portuguese in action too. I will pass because it will be my presentation and Mr. Petos did this. So this is the introduction, and this is a picture from my students from 2nd grade from Nizinga Queen, because I work with African ancestry in my English classes here in Rio. So the main questions in this study is why African languages, even though they are part of our construction as Brazilian, are not present in the school curriculum. And on the contrary, what makes English such an important subject that it's mandatory in the national curriculum? As a goal, I bring the need to analyze this hierarchy generated by the Brazilian social and racial construction between the English language and the Portuguese language, the Portuguese, sorry. And as a result, I will present some pedagogical possibilities in using both language, Portuguese and English language teaching. Here in the theoretical and methodological aspects, I will show some theoretical that I use in this study. And this picture is from a candomblé ceremony where we can find in its prayers a kind of Portuguese and some African languages as Yoruba and Fombe. I present the theoretical and methodological aspects, and in this research, I gave priority to Black American and African theories because the idea from Oliveira's concept of decoloniality was to bring the discussion about language and language policies and colonialities from thinkers that are outside the hegemonic academic axis disseminated in Brazil. As a methodology, I choose autobiographical narrative because it encompasses my experience and my voice in this field of research, besides being a methodology that is in line with the theory interdisciplinary, here expressed by the links between linguistics, history, psychology, pedagogy, and sociology. So what is Portuguese? And in this picture, I'll show the market, an important market that we have here in Rio, where in the streets we can find Portuguese in action, because Portuguese is part of our daily lives as Brazilian citizens. So Portuguese, so-called by Black Brazilian intellectual Lélia Gonzalez as Black Brazilian Portuguese or African Brazilian Portuguese, and it originates from the connections between the Portuguese language, the colonial language of Brazil, with the African language violently brought in the bodies and experience of Africans kidnapped in Africa and enslaved in the Brazilian territory. Portuguese imposes itself on our lives, Portuguese imposes itself on our lives, on our construction as Brazilian, because all Brazilians speak Portuguese, even if they don't know it, and as another form of resistance from our African ancestry. In its formation, we can observe traces of language from the Bantu linguistic trunk as Kimbundu, Umbundu, and Kikongo, as we can see here in the orange part, and from Niger-Congoese linguistic trunk, such as Yoruba and Fombe, as we can see here in the red part. From these regions came largest contingents of people abducted to Brazil. In the next slide, I will show a part of a song by the group Bonga, that is a cultural group, the musical group from Pernambuco state here in Brazil, where we can see the Portuguese in action.
Chão batido, coco pisado, mané. 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 Segura a telha que vou fazer terra tremer. Eu vou que é forte, tem azeite de viver. Amole esse povo que eu quero ver ele gemer. Samba Laurinha, fazer que comprei pra você. Chão batido.
So, as an example of Portuguese influence, we can see here, just let me change here my screen. The palatalized pronunciation of D and T, as in day, that we say in Portuguese dia, and they say dia, and for example, that we say tia, and they say tia. A tendency to mark the plural in the article, as in some African language from Bantu trunk, as for example, boys, in standard Portuguese, we say os meninos, and in Portuguese, we say os meninos, marking the plural only in the article. In phonetics, we have the insertion of a vowel between two consonants, as we have lawyer, advogado in standard Portuguese, and they put an E between D and V, saying advogado. As removing the R in the end of infinitive verbs, as we have in tremer, as in the song, tremer, they say tremer. And the most expressive, if I can say this, is the change between L and R as allophones. For example, instead of saying blouse, blusa, they say brusa, because it appears also in English language teacher when we teach blue to some students, and they can't say blue, they say brew, because of this change, because of this expression. And sometimes it reads as a phonetic problem by some teachers or magicians, but when you see the history of the family of this student, you can notice that it's normal. Everybody in his family speaks this way. So this is not a problem. This is an African heritage, and it wants to be read in another way. So here we have a brief history of English language teaching in Brazil. So the first English school was created in 1809, taught by decree by Dom João VI, where the English language was taught to meet the training to the Brazilian elite, formed only by Europeans. Slavery was still ongoing, and the Black population in Brazil only gained free access to the education system legally between 1950 and 1960. In 40s, for example, we could naturally find this kind of phrases in the didactic material that we can see here in our screen, in this slide. So after that, the most impactful laws for English language education in the country were these, making the teaching of language compulsory on national territory today. Here we can see a little of violence in language teaching. This is a rap battle that is a cultural manifestation here in Brazil. So violence can be present in objective and subjective ways. In colonial language, we can see described by some authors as physical violence, such as students being spanked for speaking local language and not speaking modern languages in class. Racism, like a teacher who painted a picture of a monkey on student's face because he didn't speak the colonial language in class and used his local language public humiliation, as a student who had to wear a necklace and walk around the school for not speaking the colonial language in class. Microviolence, such as invisibilizing the speech of Black students in class, or using different measures to evaluate Black students and white students. Disrespect, as mocking students if they don't know how to speak the standard English, or if they don't know some icons from white cultures as Eiffel Tower, as London Eye, or Statue of Liberty. And in Portuguese, we have this violence presented because it's not recognized as a language to be taught in the educational Brazilian system. It's used only as subject in academic space, but not a language to be used to produce text in this academic space. So it's seen as a wrong language, and a language that's used by teachers but not permitted for students, because teachers use Portuguese when they are free of judgment, because they are not using the standard Portuguese, for example. And if the students speak Portuguese in class, they are violently corrected by teachers. So why do we learn English but not Portuguese? And this is a picture from Salvador, the city with the highest amount of Black people in the Brazilian territory, where Portuguese is very present. Some of the reasons are the use of English as a tool of power and whitening, because Brazilian imaginaries is still permeated by the myth of racial democracy, which saw with good eyes the miscegenation and as a way of whitening the Brazilian population, because eugenicists in politics had a plan in 30s to exterminate the Black population in Brazil in up to 100 years. Thus, Afrophobia, rejection of African characteristics, and neurophilia are present in language teaching, in English language teaching too. Racism, even though it's part of our structures of Brazilian society, is still not recognized in Brazil. The acquisition of English as a tool for professional growth, but this alone does not do it. Because in order to evolve professionally, especially the Black Brazilian population, the need to transgress economic, social, and especially racial barriers. Portuguese is a tool for the empowerment of Black population. And in a racist society like Brazil, this could generate change in the current social structure. As a conclusion, we can observe, the teaching of Portuguese in Brazilian territory can be an important tool to rescue the African heritage. And here I will bring some pedagogical possibilities about using Portuguese in English language teaching. And I will start with this activity that was a book that I built it with my students, and it started from a text that talked about tourism in favelas, and why we discussed about the way it was done in favelas, because they use, for example, safari cars to do it. They take pictures without the permission of the people that live there. And in this book, my students brought their point of view about their reality, because here favelas are seen as a violent places, but it's not only this there. They have people that are created there, they grow there, and they brought their affection, their positive view about their creation, their places, and their experience in these places. So I could count on Felipe Valentim, that is a writer, and Julia Nunes, that was the illustrator in this book, and Portuguese is present in the text. And here we have an activity from professor from Teacher Zaniota that used Kimbundo and English in her English classes, building glossaries with her students from 4th grade or 3rd grade. And that here we have the conclusion. This is a capoeira circle with my students at school, where we can find the Portuguese in its songs. And here we can see the Portuguese is a tool of African heritage, and it could help students to improve their self-esteem and to improve their performance at school. And the Auckland School Board case is an important example where we can see how other varieties in the same territory can help students to improve their lives, not only to students, but also for the whole school community. It's a way to demarginalize the Portuguese if we teach them at school, if you teach it at school, sorry. And teachers are an important part of this change because they will do the bridge between the acknowledgement and the actions for change. And here in the citation, I bring it because I believe that this study of English language and the Portuguese has to be designed to our students, to our reality and to our conceptions and needs. And that's it. It was my presentation. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you so much for that brilliant presentation. That was really provocative. I want to invite next Dr. Rose Lugano to offer her presentation. Dr. Rose Lugano is joining us from the University of Florida, and she has a PhD. She got her PhD in 2005 in comparative literature with a concentration in African literatures written in English and Swahili, and a minor in women's studies from the Pennsylvania State University. She has been teaching Swahili since 1981. She has taught Swahili language and African literature in the Department of Languages, Literatures, and Cultures at the University of Florida since 2004. She has published several research papers on both language and literature topics. She was a recipient of the Carnegie African Diaspora Fellowship in 2017, and she is currently documenting her mother tongue, Kitaita, and developing other learning materials. And Dr. Lugano's paper this morning is entitled Appropriating Form and Content for Effective Communication, an examination of the poem of Moana Kupona and Molade. Thank you, Dr. Lugano, and we look forward to hearing your talk.
Thank you for that introduction. Let me share my screen. Can everybody see it?
It's coming up.
Yes, I can see it now.
Okay, so again, thank you for the organizers, for UNC Chapel, and everybody who's here to listen. And this is my topic, appropriating form and content and examination of Moana Kupona. So now that it's so wide, how do I go forward again? Because I can't see the other slides.
You're not able to see the presentation or us?
I can see you. It's I need to go to the next slide. There is, for what I can see from my end is just the big presentation. I can't see the buttons to go.
Can you
just click on it, I think.
Well, Limo, are you in presentation mode?
Yes.
Okay, so it should give you.
Okay. Yeah, I found it.
There you go.
Okay.
Thank you. I think it was my computer. It was taking its time to
load up.
Computer.
Okay.
So anyway, I'm looking at these two texts because I looked at the time they were presented. The poem of Moana Kupona was published in Swahili, of course, Swahili using Arabic script in 1860. And then Molade is a very recent production by Sembene Osman in 2004. The poem, So again, I'm looking at form and content. Form, as described, of course, the issue of form and content has been a long debate between Plato, Aristotle, and all those people a long time ago, that when they argue which is important, is it form, is it content? But in this context, I'm not really arguing about their argument. I am looking at how African creative producers use or appropriate form to prosper their message or for ultimate communication. So, but I'm arguing, I think they go beyond form and content to make their message more successful or to their objective. So form is the style, structure, techniques such as poems, and we have the genres, all of them fall under form. The way, how the message is conveyed. Is it through poetry? Is it a movie? Is it a novel, and so on? And the content is the message or ideas, subject, or matter intended for the reader and audience. The two are inseparable. They unite to produce an artistic whole. So, but I go beyond that, saying that in African cultures, I think the creative producers go beyond just form and content. When they decide which one to use, they have to factor in so many other things. So I'm using these two texts to justify that stand. Okay, so the poem of Mwanakupona or Mwanakupona's poem, as it is listed under Allen, because that poem was translated into Swahili. It is in Kiamu dialect. Mwanakupona was born in Pati Island, and this poem is the only written literary text written by a woman in 1860 that has been preserved throughout the time up to today, and which is interesting because that is the time women didn't write. Even in the Western world, women wrote in pseudonyms. So it is interesting to note that the poem has been considered one of the canonical texts in Swahili literary tradition. So the objective of her writing the poem was to advise her daughter. Mwanakupona herself was terminally ill. She was going to die, and her daughter was very young, and she wanted, she couldn't advise her before she died. She knew she was going to die. So she wrote this poem as advice to her daughter so that it can be given to her when she becomes of age. And so the poem, in the poem, she's advising her daughter concerning wifely virtues, religious obligations, socialization, and expectations. So let me read a little bit from the stanza. She says in stanza 91, because I want to show you how important it is. She says, her advice: hold fast to your religion and the ordinances of God. Behave properly to be accepted and respected in society. And third, be trustworthy. So in stanza 22, she says, listen to me, my dear. A woman requires approval of 5 before she has peace in this world and the next. Of God, of his prophets, of father and mother, as you know, and the 5th of her husband, as it has been said again and again. So she gives this advice of all these people. Then she focuses more on her relationship with her husband, how she has to treat him, how she must take care of him, how it is so important that she must be pleasing to him because he has power over her life here and her life in the afterlife. So, for example, in stanza 25, 26, 27, here is what her advice is for her daughter. If you die fast, seek his blessings, the husband, to go with you upon it, to go with it upon you, so you will find the way. When you rise again, the choice is your husband's. He will be asked his will, and that will be done. Yeah, stanza 27. If he wishes you to go to paradise, at once you will go. If he says to hell, there you must be sent. So you can see how important, and she goes further in stanza 95. This is stanza 27. The whole poem has 101 stanzas. In stanza 95 and 96, she reiterates and emphasizes this point. So she says, read it, you who are growing up, and be obedient to your husband. Then you will not be afflicted in this world, nor in the next. She who is obedient to her husband has good repute and charm. She who obeys him has her path made straight. So there she is re-emphasizing the points she gave in stanza 25 and 27. So this, though the poem was considered private, it became public due to its theme and its usefulness in the socialization process within Islamic communities along the coast of East Africa. So it became canonized, and it was used to teach in the madrasas, to socialize the girls, to teach them these virtues. And later I'll look at why was this so. So this is introduction to the poem, a little excerpts. Let's go to Sembène Osman's movie, Molade. It's a movie written in Bambara, a language spoken in, I think, quite a number of countries in West Africa. It has subtitles in English. Sembène Osman is known as the father of African cinema, and some have called him the male feminist because most of his works focused on women's issues. Even his movies, his books. I remember reading God's Bits of Wood, and even in God's Bits of Wood, a novel, the main protagonist is a woman, a prostitute for that matter, who ends up rallying people together to protest the injustices for the workers. So what was the objective of Molade making this movie? He wanted to provide a campaign tool against female cutting or female purification, or what people in the West call FGM. So he says in his works, and I think Samba has done a good job of analyzing the movie, he intended to give a voice to the millions of marginalized and voiceless, especially when you consider that female cutting or female circumcision as the societies that practice it, call it, was so much a taboo. You didn't talk about it. It wasn't talked about at all. Now here he is doing it in Bambara, almost bringing voice into this topic and bringing it into the public and to introducing it for discussion. And his idea was that this movie would be translated in many African languages so that it can be used, it can be widely disseminated into African cultures and maybe effect speedy eradication of this practice. So what's going on in the movie? A little bit about the movie. The movie is about women in the village. The movie was shot in Burkina Faso, and he uses ordinary women. He uses ordinary women to talk about the issue of female circumcision. One of his main characters is Kole. Kole had, according to the story, Kole had lost 2 children. She only has 1, and this one is because she had to have cesarean to give birth to the child. So because of her painful experience, she decided her daughter was not going to be circumcised. So, so she has this adult daughter who hasn't been circumcised. And when this practice of purification would happen every time in the year, when it came to a certain time that this particular time that the girls had to go through the process, 6 girls decide to flee from the purification, and 2 commit suicide, and 4 of them make their way to Kole's house, and Kole decides to appropriate this Molade. It's a kind of an incantation, which it's a traditional unbreakable potent spell of sanctuary that can only be dissolved by the pronouncer. So once she pronounces the Molade, the people, the purifiers, the elders, nobody can touch the girls because they fear the repercussion of the Molade. So Kole is able to keep the girls to protect them from cutting, but the society is, and especially the patriarchal powers are up in arms, and they incite Kole's husband Sire to flog her in the village square, and Kole refuses to pronounce it until she's able to fetch the Molade, and finally she convinces the rest of the women to agree to end purification process, and that's how the story ends, the movie. So again, Temben is using the movie to, and of course the idea of it being translated into African, different African languages is very powerful, and later we will see about it. Let's look at the analysis. For interrogation, how is the choice of form appropriate to convey the content? Was the poem form the best genre for the purposes and objectives she had for composing it? Was the movie the best means for conveying the purposes Mbene had for Molade? Do creative producers consider, or African creative producers, consider other factors besides form and content? So the poem, let's go back to the poem. The poem, I think from my analysis, the poem was the best genre to choose for her objective. Swahili poems were literally sung. So even today we have a special form of music, which is called Taarab, where it is actually poetry being sung. A lot of it was by women. Now we have men too. So it's very interesting. So if they could, at a time where literacy was non-existent, very few people could read and write, and to think of the fact that even Islamic texts were written in Arabic, and I would imagine very few people, 1860s, who could read and write. So writing this poem and having it sung was a way of disseminating the information, teaching making the Islamic message available to women who could not read and write. So they could memorize the song and sing it, and even maybe focus on certain stanzas. The poem also is divided into stanzas. She says in chapter 8, she talks to her daughter and tells her, "I'm giving you a chain of pearls." So it's like it's a bead with different beads. She can choose to memorize different chunks of information. So because of its stanza form, it's very easy for one to just memorize a little bit of information, the one that one needs, than to, if it was a book or a song. Some songs are overtaken by time, but this having been a poem, and because of its theme, it became canonized because it became useful in the culture. So the little bits enable somebody to memorize, and because also the poem, like Proverbs, is able to contain a lot of information using very little language. So it is very economical in the time, in terms of how much it can convey, even with very little language. Poems were very popular genre, and because they were used in religious texts, it was easily accessible by stanzas and by numbers. You could just memorize different stanza number, and so on. And the theme within the popular genre of time made it possible for the text to be preserved and promoted, and it promoted its usage as a teaching tool for female socialization among Islamic communities of East African coast. What about the cinema? Of course, the cinema was the best choice I think Sembene chose to talk about, to leave us as a legacy for his passion for eradicating female cutting. cinema, he considered it as night school. In the cultures where people would rather buy food than books, I mean, Africa is not a book reading culture because books are expensive, but you can get an audience and capture them for 2 hours. You can even rally a village and bring them together and show them the movie. And can you imagine the movie in their own language? If that movie was translated into their own languages, for them to look to watch a movie and the people are speaking their own language, and not only are the people speaking their own languages, the people were ordinary people. So he uses ordinary, relatable African women and men in ordinary spaces to achieve extraordinary transformation. For example, even as I watched the movie, there are people I related to. They look like my auntie, or they look like my grandma, or so it is. He didn't use renowned actresses and actors, but local people in their local spaces doing ordinary things. And what is he saying? He's saying, even in that sense, that ordinary people can effect change. It doesn't mean that you have to be somebody known, somebody famous, somebody popular. No, even as anybody can start a revolution. Like Kole in her space, she was the second wife in her of her husband. There were 3 of them. Yeah. So even in her marginalized space, she was able to effect change or to start a movement. So Sembene Osman, even as he's entertaining, he is educating people. So he in the movie, he gives the cultures a tool from which they can look at themselves and critique themselves, and kind of, even as they're being entertained, they are being made to think about this thing. Because in the movie, 2 girls die. Eventually, the 4 who had escaped, one of the girls is enticed by her mother to break the molade and go, and the mother picks her and takes her, she gets circumcised and she dies. So at the end, it is 3 children who have died, and before, of course, many had died. And so women begin to question themselves, is this worth it? Should we keep, like the Swahili say, should we be a slave to tradition, or should tradition be formed by us? So again, this is an interesting. So the impact of the movie is more powerful in the sense that it combines vision and audio together, and from the setting of it, it was very authentic African. No Western people, no external intervention. So what is Sembene saying? Africans can solve their own problems themselves. They don't need external intervention. So the choice, in conclusion, the choice of form for both texts was very appropriate to convey their context. I argue that African literary creators have to go beyond just matching form to content to consider historical events. They have to consider cultural and realistic circumstances of their target audience. For example, in the movie, Sembene knows the movie, it's easy to rally people to come to a movie. Just go to any village and mention free movie. People would come and assemble and watch the movie. And for them to see themselves and identify with the characters and identify with the issue and see themselves and critique themselves, that is very, very powerful. For the poem, at a time when people did not know how to read and write, couldn't read the main text, could only go by what the preacher or the sheikh or the imam said, this poem made Islamic text or Islamic dogma, Islamic rules accessible to the believers of that religious religion. And therefore, it was a text that was preserved simply, I think, because it was very useful for imparting Islamic ideology. It was useful for advising a child. And I would go further to say, at that time, 1860s, I don't think she could have said any other thing apart from enabling her child to survive the status quo of the society she was in. So she was kind of equipping her for life, for successful life in her community. So the choice of language also is important, because both texts were written in African languages, Swahili, and here is Bambara. I think that text promotes communication when people can hear a message in their own languages. It is more impactful in the sense that they understand the language, they can relate to the language, they understand their language more than, of course, foreign languages and so on. So I think they were very successful in promoting their message. They attained their objectives more than if they were to use any other genre apart from Sambena using the movie and Manakupona using the poem. And I think I will end there and thank everybody here, my bibliography. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lugano. I see some notes in the chat that Dr. Ada would like to present next because there are some network issues. And so she just wants to be sure that she's able to offer her presentation while the network is still secure. So I think if it's okay with you, Dr. Aliyu, we'll have Dr. Ada present first, and then we'll have Dr. Aliyu present last. So just a quick introduction for Dr. Ada. So Dr. Ada Anyachebelu is a lecturer in the Department of Linguistics, African and Asian Studies, Faculty of Arts at the University of Lagos. She obtained her first degree from University of Nigeria in Nsukka and her master's as well as her PhD degrees from the University of Lagos. Her major research areas are symbolism, folk tales, literature, culture, and onomastics. She has published several articles on both national and international journals in her areas of interest. Two of her major publications are Patterns of Igbo Spousal Names, Research on Hiafa, a journal of African studies, and cultural representation in Obidia, a post-colonial literature. And she's a member of the International Society for Oral Literatures of Africa. So thank you, Dr. Ada, and we look forward to hearing your presentation.
Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. I pray and hope that internet will permit me to present my work. My name is Adora Anyachebelu from University of Lagos, Nigeria. And my topic, the topic of my presentation is literary loans besides stylistics and aesthetics. And I'm using Achebe's Things Fall Apart as my literary text. Language is a special tool used by literary authors to convey their messages as well as embellish their works. Most Nigerian literary authors, including Achebe, make use of English language as against their indigenous languages. Some of such authors, in the course of their writing, make use of expressions from their indigenous languages or other languages, despite the fact that they write in the English language. Achebe, as one of such authors, is able to stylistically and creatively manipulate language as a medium for showcasing and exporting the Igbo culture and by extension, the African culture. Prior to Achebe's writing, many Western authors negatively portrayed Africans and their culture. Some were of the view that Africans do not have any meaningful culture. But following Mwala 1985, everybody and every society possesses a philosophy in the sense that there are certain basic beliefs about the universe and man, which an individual or society holds in the light of the existing social environment. These beliefs help the individual or society to determine his actions and mode of living, though some of such beliefs may not be explicitly stated, yet it is possible to abstract them from the life and culture of the people. This study, therefore, sets out to identify and abstract Igbo words and expressions employed by Achebe in Things Fall Apart, explain the meanings of such loans, expatiate how Achebe is able to use such loans in the expression and representation of African culture. Several works have been done and carried out in respect with Achebe's Things Fall Apart. Some have looked at it in from the dimension of language, culture, gender, and several of them. So we are not really going to do into literature in full because of time. Then Igbo culture is a subpart of the African culture. Igbo culture, and by extension, the African culture, is the product of African philosophy. African philosophy in the words of Okoro 1985 is a rational, coherent, and critical nature. African philosophy constitutes the highest form of African thinking and reflection. It is the motto and catalyst of Africa's entire cultural endeavors and civilization. The traditional Igbo possesses a philosophy which is traditional and customary, not systematic and also not written. This philosophy, according to Nwala, is personalistic, highly ritualized, and full of myths and unanalyzed imagery. It was authoritarian, being an instrument of social control. It was pragmatic, meant to solve practical problems of food, security, peace, and the general welfare of the community. It was religiously oriented with an economic base, probably due to the fact that the Igbo philosophy was not written as of that period, led some Western scholars to assume that Igbo have no philosophy. It is actually the Igbo philosophy encapsulated in their cultural elements that Achebe showcases to his readers through his use of Igbo loans in Things Fall Apart. One of the aims of African literary artists, among others, is to project their culture to the wider world. So African literary authors seek to showcase and project the rich African cultural heritage and their experiences as a people through their heritage and their experiences, as a people through their works. Achebe, being one of the African literary authors, is not left out in this regard. He stylistically manipulates language in order to express some aspects of African traditional system of leadership, belief, justice, religion, as well as other cultural elements. Achebe is able to effectively achieve the above through the use of Igbo loans in his work. This is so because foreign language may never be able to fully describe another culture without losing some of their cultural essence in the course of translation. In some cases, Achebe, in the bid to revitalize, expose, and celebrate African cultural heritage, exposes some despicable aspects of Igbo culture that needed elimination. According to Mode and Sani 2015, they try in their work, their line of thought towards our arguments that when they say that Achebe attempts to solve the dilemma of how to impact the essential and individual quality of a traditional African way of life by capturing its flavor and essence through setting up unprecedented stylistic devices, the use of different Englishes, the speech patterns, the use of Igbo proverbs and the traditional folk stories, and the use of particularized Igbo words and phrases. He weaves these linguistic features skillfully into the total fabric of the novel, so as to beautify and overcome the communication gap between the Igbo and the white men. Hence, Achebe in Things Fall Apart says, does the white man understand our custom about land? How can he when he does not even speak our language? But he says that our customs are bad, quoting Achebe. Here we attempt to a categorization of some of the Igbo cultural elements and philosophy that Achebe attempts to showcase to his readers through the use of Igbo loans. So I've been able to group these Igbo loans into subheadings, like those under stories, those under believing certain beliefs, Igbo beliefs, those in some are under ceremonies. So I start with stories. And by stories, I mean the one we call Ifo, folk tales, because these are very essential in Igbo life. Through the folk tales, we are able to indoctrinate the younger members of the society or to understand the culture and belief patterns of the Igbo people. Achebe, in bringing folk tales to his work, intends his readers to know that folk tales are part of the Igbo culture through which the younger members of the society are indoctrinated. Stories are a means of inciting men to strength, of teaching about the gods, and of generally passing on the culture. Okonkwo tells masculine stories of violence and bloodshed, but the mothers talk of the tortoise wily ways. Folk tales are powerful tools used in idyllic Igbo communities to come to terms with the culture and philosophy of the people. Then following Ibeli 2016, beyond entertainment functions of folktale, it kindles the imagination of a child and helps to communicate appropriate cultural and societal traits to him, thus making an important contribution to the educational processes. To advance the contemporary society, there is need to look into the past as a mirror and use it to evaluate the present and predicate the future, especially in current need to rebrand the present society. Since the advent of mankind, man has puzzled over the constitution of the universe and wondered what controls it, the elemental features and their various functions, especially with regard to birth and death, reincarnation, and other rhetorical questions and ontological issues. These and many other questions arouse the consciousness that led storytellers to interpret and find suitable answers to their problem through folktales in Igbo society. Hence, Achebe was able to bring in some Igbo folktales, though some of them were actually told in English, but one of the folktale poems was rendered in Igbo, and I will take it. Ezeline lina salan ezilikwaya sale kwaba kworiogoryo ebedanda nechieze ebuzuzu netegbu. So this is part of the poem attached to a story in Igbo folktale that Achebe tactfully brings in to showcase the readers that Igbo has a philosophy and a pattern of storytelling through which they hand over their beliefs and culture to the younger members of the society. Oral African storytelling is essentially a communal participatory experience, as it is an interactive oral performance. Such participation is an essential part of traditional African communal life and basic training. So by bringing also that folktale, Achebe hopes to introduce the readers to the world of communal life pattern that exists among the Igbo, whereby, because in the course of the storytelling, people, children, adults, they gather together and they share communal life patterns. Then we move over to traditional healthcare delivery system. Traditional African people have means of treating diseases which are very much effective, like the orthodox ones, even till in these contemporary times. Achebe takes his readers to the world of African traditional mode of treatment of diseases. When Okonkwo identifies Ezima's sickness as Iba, Iba simply means fever. It's Iba, I'm quoting now, said Okonkwo as he took his machete and went into making the medicine for Iba. Okonkwo returned from the bush carrying on his left shoulder a large bundle of grasses and leaves, roots and barks of medicinal trees and shrubs. He went into Ekwefi's hut, put down his load and sat down. Okonkwo selected the best from his bundle in their due proportion and cut them up. He put them in the pot, and Ekwefi poured some water. She set the pot on fire. Okonkwo says to Ekwefi, "You must watch the pot carefully," he said as he went, "and don't allow it to overboil. If it does, its power will be gone." He took down the pot from the fire and placed it in front of the stool. He then roused Ezima and placed her on the stool astride the steaming pot. The thick mat was thrown overboard. So by bringing in this instance, Achebe intends to let his readers into the world of Igbo traditional system of healthcare delivery that even prior to the westernization, that African people have their means of identifying and treating certain illnesses like that one mentioned. I could remember vividly while growing up in my village, my grandmother then, if anybody falls sick and has fever, it's the same pattern of treatment. She will go and gather some leaves and shrubs and boil them, and the person should drink them, or at some point, the person is covered with the heat of, and that heals the sickness. Or if somebody has toothache, she normally goes into the bush, cuts up or back of a particular tree, places it on that particular portion of the side that the tooth is aching, and that is the end of that toothache. So Achebe intends his readers to know and understand that medical treatment did not emerge with Westernization. Then we go over to ceremonies. Achebe was able to introduce and bring some of the ceremonies that are being held in Igbo society. You talk about the New Yam Festival, which we call the Iriji. You talk about the marriage ceremonies. When Achebe mentions Uri, I quote, Okonkwo's friend Obierika was celebrating his child's Uri. By Uri, it means part of betrothal ceremony when the dowry is paid. It was the day on which her suitor, having already paid the greater part of her bride price, would bring palm wine not only to her parents and immediate relatives, but to the wider and extensive group of kinsmen called Omunna. So this Uri is part of the betrothal payment, which is done. And by introducing the readers to this, Achebe intends to let his readers know that the Igbo has a way or processes that has to be undergone before marriage is consummated in Igbo society. And that part is one part of it is called the Uri. And also to let the readers also know that marriage is also a communal affair in Igbo society. Else, the Umunna, the kinsmen, the palm wine that was to be brought would have been handed over to the immediate family. But Achebe lets us know that the palm wine was meant for the community, the communal, the kinsmen, extended family, not just the immediate family. So marriage in Igbo society is a communal affair that involves the other members of the society, not just the immediate members of the family. Then we also look at certain beliefs that Achebe showcases in his work. We look at the belief in Osuka system. The Osuka system in Igbo society is an ancient social belief which ascribes an inferior status to a group of people known as Osu or Ume, causing them limited social interaction with the rest of the community, called the Diala. The Diala are the freeborns. They are free to associate with others, but these ones called those, they have limits. They are forbidden from doing certain things. While the Osu are the slave, the sacrificial lamb to the gods, the ancestors of the present day son Osu people were offered to the deities to appease the gods. Consequently, all of their offspring inherited the blemish. They are today looked upon as property of the gods to which their forefathers were offered. Achebe tactfully brings in this abominable practice to the attention on page 125 of that novel. These outcasts, I'm quoting, are or Osu, seeing that the new religion welcomed twins and such abomination, thought that it was possible that they would also be received. Before God, he said, there is no slave or free. We are all children of God, and we must receive these our brothers. What will the heathen say of us when they hear that we receive Osu into our midst? They will laugh. The two outcasts shaved off their hair. So Achebe tactfully brings in this to show that in spite of the fact that the Igbo culture Igbo society has a beautiful culture, but some of their cultures are also abominable that need to be thrown away, such as that of Osu, which he even called abomination too. So he now wants the outer world to know that in as much as we have beautiful cultures, but we also have some ugly part of us that we also need to do away with. And he also mentioned the issue of the outcasts needing to shave off their hair, showing that these outcasts, they are not even allowed to shave. They still look shabby, very dirty. And that is why people abhor them. They are not allowed to associate with other members of the society. And even that Osu system still thrives, although is hidden, is not obvious, but the Igbos know that they are still in existence in the society. Then we talk about the belief in Obanje. The Igbo, they believe in Obanje, a child that is born, he comes and dies. Changeling, a child who repeatedly dies and returns to his mother to be reborn. The traditional Igbo believe that Obanje is evil spirit that causes people to die untimely, while others perceive Obanje to be deities that inhabit the human body and come to the world They do not live long due to the oath or vow they made to their group members in the spirit world. Ogbanje usually possesses what is called Iyuwa. This Iyuwa is what empowers them to die and return. They die and return at will to the same mother. Such power can only be nullified by a potent medicine man to enable the Ogbanje live a normal human life like other children. Achebe addresses the issue of Ogbanje through the character Ezima when he says, everybody knew she was an Ogbanje. These sudden bouts of sicknesses and health were typical of her kind. They are usually sickly. And this faith had been strengthened when a year or so ago, a medicine man had dug up Ezima's Iyuwa. Everybody knew then that she would live because her bond with the world of Ogbanje had been broken. No Ogbanje would yield her secrets easily, and most of them never did because they died too young before they could be asked questions. So these Ogbanje have what we call in Igbo Iyuwa. Is this Iyuwa that empowers them to go, they die, they come back, they die several times, torturing the mother. But not until that Iyuwa is discovered and destroyed by a powerful medicine man, that child will continue to torment the mother. So there are powerful traditional medicine people that specializes in dealing with the issue of Ogbanje, and that is one of the things that Achebe attempts to showcase to the readers, that these are some of the things, beliefs that exist in a Igbo society. Though some of them are good and some of them need to be done away with. Then the issue of beautification. The traditional Igbo society have their patterns of beautifying their bodies, especially the young maidens. Prior to the use of lipstick and all eyeshadow, eye pencil, they have their local modes of beautifying themselves. When Achebe mentions uli, they painted their bodies with red camwood and drew beautiful patterns with uli. Uli simply is a dye used by women for drawing patterns, beautiful patterns on their skin as a mode of beautification. Achebe also made mention of jigida. Jigida is just a string of waist beads that young maidens wear around their waist as a means of beautification. Then we look at the belief in chi, C-H-I, chi. Chi concept in Things Fall Apart has a religious background. It is a personal God, the supreme God shared by each individual, but more specifically in his aspects as giver and author of destiny. According to Rhodes, Chi is a unique life force which each person possesses. No two persons is unique. Chi is complex in Igbo concept because when you talk about Chi, when somebody wants to greet somebody, the person can say Chi abola. Chi in that context means day break. But in this context, whereby Achebe brings it, is talking about God, the personal God. So it's a complex expression of phenomenon, but we are focusing on the dimension of which Achebe uses it. Chi is complex Igbo concept that Achebe repeatedly refers to by illustrating the concept in various contexts through the story. Achebe translates Chi as personal God. When he first mentions Unoka's bad fortune, as the book progresses, it gradually picks up other meanings. Clearly, his personal God or Chi was not made for greater things. I quote, "A man could not rise beyond the destiny of his Chi. The saying of the elders was not true, that if a man said here, his Chi also affirmed. Here was a man whose Chi said nay, despite his own affirmation." This is talking about Okonkwo. So the Igbo believe they have a maxim that says, Onyekwe, Chia ekwe. If somebody says yes, invariably the Chi will say yes, but not in all cases. But in the case of Okonkwo, Okonkwo said yes, that he needs to rise above poverty. He does not want to live the life that Unoka, his father, lived. And his Chi also helped him and said yes. That was why he was able to rise beyond his father and became a worthy man. Although at the end of the story, he began to fight as if he was fighting with his Chi, which eventually led to his total destruction and downfall. Then we look at the concept of Chukwu, is also in line with that Chi, but this
Dr. Anya Tebelu, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to notify you that you're at time. So if it's possible for you to summarize the remainder of the talk, and then we can have a little bit of time for the last presentation and some Q&A.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we also looked at the issue of the governance and justice system and musical instrument. I will just go through the governance and justice, then I will conclude my discussion. The Igbo have a well-established and effective system of justice, which the British replaced with the system of direct district commissioners and court messengers. Achebe expresses part of the Igbo justice system through his introduction of Egugu, a special kind of masquerade. Disputes in the tribe, which cannot be resolved in other ways, come before the Egugu, the greatest mad spirits of the clan. Hearing witnesses of both sides, for example, the tribunal comes to a decision in the case of Uzowulu, who beats his wife and his indigent in-laws, who took his wife and children away. Egugu settles the dispute. They warn Uzowulu that it is not bravery when a man fights a woman. They tell him to take a pot of wine to his in-laws. They tell Odugwe to return Uzowulu's wife if he comes with wine. The Egugu's duty is simply to settle dispute. They do not fall into apportioning blames or praises to either of the parties. So in conclusion, because of time, things fall apart. Though a fictional piece could be referred to as a compendium of traditional African culture, it is a reflection of an Igbo society that was highly organized and deeply religious, a society which values bravery, hard work, material wealth, as well as eloquence and dignity, a society that possessed an enviable culture. It is obvious that Achebe writes in English language for obvious reason of wider audience, yet Achebe in so doing does not leave behind his African culture and language. In order to tackle the problem of presenting the African heritage and culture in a foreign language, Achebe incorporates elements of the Igbo language into his novel. By incorporating Igbo words, rhythms, language, and concepts into an English text about his culture, Achebe goes a long way to bridge a cultural divide. In Things Fall Apart, Achebe creatively manipulates language as a medium through which his readers could gain access to Igbo indigenous culture, aesthetic, and cosmology. Achebe, through his use of Igbo speech patterns and linguistic features, creates an authentic African story that effectively bridges the cultural and linguistic gap between Igbo and non-Igbo readers. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Anya Chebelu, for that presentation. So we'll move on to our final presenter, Dr. Abdullahi Aliyu, who is joining us from Aminu Kano College of Islamic and Legal Studies in Kano, Nigeria. And Dr. Aliyu's presentation this morning is entitled Understanding Hausa Culture Through Numbers, an Ethno-Mathematical Perspective. Thank you, Dr. Aliyu, for your presentation. Also, just a note before Dr. Aliyu begins, it looks like the panel is going to go slightly over time. If you could kindly, if you have some questions you'd like to start placing in the chat, I can start to collect them, and so that when Q&A begins, we can just sort of get the conversation rolling. Thank you for those of you who can stay a little longer to engage with the presenters. Okay, Dr. Aliyu, thank you so much. Dr. Aliyu, can you hear me? It looks like you're muted. And if Aisha Maimota could kindly...
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now. Thank you so much.
Okay, no problem. Let me share my...
Excuse me, I think to enhance his voice, he could disable the video.
Dr. Aliyu, did you hear Dr. Mwamzadi's suggestion that you might disable the video?
Okay, let me disable the video. Okay. Give me a second, please. Is it okay now?
Yes, I can see your presentation and I can hear you.
Is it okay? Is it okay for everyone? Hello, everyone. This is Abdullahi Aliyu from Kano, Nigeria. I hope everyone is listening. My presentation is about understanding Hausa culture through numbers, premised on the ethnomathematical perspective. Let me begin the introduction by saying that, making a general statement, that every society has its ways and means of shaping and defining its culture. And so Hausa people are in the show. They are part of this show. And one of the ways, I think this is my firm belief, of showcasing a society's culture is through counting. I mean, the use of numbers, which coincidentally is part of the concept proposed by the Ambrosio of concept of ethnomathematics. By way of definition, ethnomathematics is the study of mathematical practices of specific cultural groups. In this case, Hausa force in dealing with their environmental activities. This is an indigenous mathematics, which is embedded in cultural practices such as counting, measuring, comparing, classifying, playing, locating, design, and other social aspects. So, an overview of Hausa counting system. As far as Hausa counting system is concerned, it starts from 1, there is pronounced there, 1, and 8 at Goma, 10. This is unique if you compare with Fulfulde, which starts from 1 to 5, and then repetition begins. For Hausa, it is starting from 1 to 10, and then you start repeating the counting. So if you can see the screen, you see there, which is 1, B, which is 2, Uku, which is 3, Udu, which is 4, Biar, which is 5, Shida, which is 6, Bakwai, which is 7, Taka, which is 8, Tara, which is 9, Goma, which is 10. At the count of 10, one can only proceed by repeating some of the counting words, such as you can say Goma Sha there. Goma is optional. You can say Sha there, which means 10 and 1. Goma Shabi, which means 10 and 2. Goma Sha Uku, and so on and so forth. So counting specifically for Hausa starts from 1 to 10. After 10, you repeat. In so many other languages, it may be the same, but I know I'm citing Fulfulde is from 1 to 5, you start repeating. For Hausa is 1 to 10, you start repeating. So, which means there is no universality in the counting system. So another evidence that, so let me start giving evidence that Hausa counting system starts from 1 to 10. Let's take a song which says, Farkon ida da ɗai aka faro, means the beginning of counting starts from 1. In an kai ga goma, dole a komo. On reaching 10, one must return. And there are riddles and ginarigaka tukunyar kofi. I reached the magic pot before you. Kankasha air time, I've drunk 10 times. So another aspect of the Hausa counting system is the highest number imaginable and admissible in Hausa counting system is Dubu, 1,000. Here are some justifications. Dubu Barao Tachika, meaning the 1,000 of the thief is completed. He has been stealing up to about 1,000 times, and at the end of the day, he's caught, and that is the end of the road. Another one says, Yachi Dubu Sei Chetu, he has eaten 1,000 times, and there is no way out for him, only redemption, only salvation. If you want to drink beer, take that which costs 1,000. So which all of this, if, I hope you are listening, all of this shows some of the concepts in house accounting system. So what is the philosophy behind the house accounting system? So let me start by going the range from 1 to 10 and see what I can extract from the house accounting system. One of the, let me start by 1, which means daya. Daya means 1 in Hausa. And one of the unique ways in which Hausa people express these the beliefs, judgment, attitudes, and philosophy, like I said, is by the use of number from 1 to 10. And let me start by 1. Hannu ɗaya ba shi ɗaukar, if you can see from the screen, hannu ɗaya ba shi ɗaukar jinka. One hand cannot mount a thatched roof. The use of the number 1 here explains and signifies cooperation among people. That with your one hand, you cannot lift something and mount it on the rooftop. You need people to come and help you. So the use of 1 hand means you, only you, one person cannot do that thing. So another example is zama ɗaya. 1 is used here. Zama means sitting in one place. Zama wuri sitting in one place. So it's dangerous. If somebody is prone to accident, to dangers, to so many other evil things. So the idea of sitting idle, that 1 means idle. If you are sitting idle, it means zama wuri you are sitting in only one place, and so many things can happen. People have to move around something to sustain themselves, and they have to move around to avoid and skip dangers. So 1 here, the count word 1 refers to idleness. Another example which concerns 1 is narega, which means squirrel. Me uga dewawa, me uga dewawa. Ground squirrel, he is the one talking now. He is saying, he who digs 1 hole is a fool. And we all know, based on the nature of the ground squirrel, it's a clever animal that is sensitive to traps. It digs as many escape routes as possible to survive. And by implication, on the Hausa society, based on their perception, whoever relies on 1 technique of survival in life is considered a fool in Hausa society. So this is a real fact that we are witnessing among our people. So let me go to 2. Biu means 2 in Hausa. Biu means 2. So the example I can give now is na karɓe shi hannu biyu. Na karɓe shi hannu biyu. Everything with 2 hands. The use of 2 here implies warm reception. Stretching the 2 hands to receive someone signifies total warm reception in Hausa society. I know it's in some other society. And another example I can give is Gida biyu maganin gobara. Gida means house, biyu means 2. Gida biyu maganin gobara. 2 houses are remedy for fire. Mathematically, the number 2 is greater than 1. We all know this. But ethnomathematically, the 2 houses here refer to 2 wives. This is the polygamous nature of the Hausa man. In Hausa society, a man with 2 wives has a good insurance policy against fire outbreak. That fire outbreak is not the real fire outbreak. It's divorce, trouble. Your wife can trouble. If you have the other one, it's okay with you. Your wife can fall sick. If the other one is around, it's okay with you. So this 2 means plan B.
Dr. Aliyu, I cannot hear your voice anymore. Can you still hear me?
Hello.
Okay, I can hear you again, although it's a little broken up. Okay, it looks like we've lost you again. Could you type in the chat if you can still hear us? Okay, so Dr. Ali may be having some technical difficulties, so he may need some time to just restart his monitor. In the meantime, as he resets and gets ready to come back, I just wanted to put to the audience some questions that have come in, or put to the panelists some questions that have come in for you to begin sort of considering. So one question comes from, oh, Dr. Aliu, are you back? Can you hear us?
Since time is almost over, we could just go to discussion, to questions.
Yes, there's another panel at 10:45, so we may need to transition to discussion. Dr. Aliu, we do have a question here for you from Dr. Mwamzandi. Perhaps in your response to that question, you can sort of continue elaborating on the concepts you were offering us. So Dr. Mwamzandi asks, is saying 20, 30, and so on also optional as Goma 10 is in counting from 11 to 19? And then there's also a question for Ms. Azevedo that asks, Portuguese is a very interesting linguistic phenomenon. I would like to know whether this is similar to other varieties that have emerged alongside standard varieties. Is it found in specific parts of Brazil, or can we find it across the entire nation? Even if it's not allowed in the formal domains, do we have any publications in the varieties such as novels, newspapers, and plays? And then if I could add a question for Ms. Azevedo, I'm curious, since your presentation really parallels the ways that Creoles in the Caribbean are also stigmatized. I'm curious though, are there words, concepts, grammatical formations, or expressive modes that are available in Portuguese that are not available in Portuguese? So are there certain things that can be expressed through Portuguese that Portuguese really just cannot accommodate, which is something I've seen with Creoles and also with African American vernacular English? And then a question for Dr. Lugano. I'm curious if you see Kupona's poem as having or exhibiting a kind of feminist politics, and how would you compare, contrast Kupona and Sembène Ousmane? I noticed when you talked about the ways that the poem makes Islamic memory available to women who could not read and write at the time. So I'm just curious about how you would compare and contrast the politics of the two artists. So we'll open there. I would love to hear from the panelists. If there are other questions, please feel free to place them in the chat.
Hi, can I start?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'll answer first, Dr. Mwaka. Good morning, Dr. Mwaka. Portuguese is a linguistic phenomenon, but we can find this in written, not paid newspapers or plays, because it's recognized only in speech. It's recognized only while we are speaking. And it's normal to speak Portuguese while we speak also the standard Portuguese, because it's mixed. For example, when I start speaking with my family, I speak some parts of Portuguese. For example, it's normal to remove the R from the infinitive verbs while we are speaking, but when we have to write these, we write in standard Portuguese, because we know that in written Portuguese, in standard Portuguese, is not accepted. It's a language used daily by everybody. Everybody around Brazil speaks Portuguese. So we can find Portuguese in some programs, for example, some series, but it's always used to reproduce poor people. It represents poor people. It's a poor speech. For example, Black people speak Portuguese in this kind of artistic representation, not for white people or for rich people. I don't know if I could answer your question. And about Mr. Samuel, as I said to Mr. Moaca, I think that Portuguese it's mixed to Portuguese, to standard Portuguese, but it's not recognized, how can I say, their concepts, but it's used in academic studies. In academic studies, we can find the difference between Portuguese and Portuguese, the standard Portuguese, sorry. But it's not recognized as a language to be used, as you said about Caribbean varieties, for example. And that's it. I don't know if it's enough, but that's it.
Very interesting.
Thank you very much.
Other comments and responses?
Okay, can I go?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, so when I compare these two creative producers from different eras, you say to look at their feminism. Yes, I see Mana Kupona at that time, really, when you think of women, women didn't talk. Her poem was preserved because it was useful, a useful tool for socializing girls and teaching them the Islamic religion. But the way she describes, okay, so she's equipping her daughter, so that she may survive in this society where women are not heard. But the way she describes how she's supposed to take care of the man, it almost presents the man as a baby, because like she has to, when he sleeps, one of the things, she has to sit there and fan him. When he wakes up, she has to be there ready with some warm water for him to bathe. I mean, the man is made to look like he's completely dependent on the wife, on the woman for survival. So people have had issues with that, the way because it's like the question of, what kind of man do we see in the text? It's a man who's almost like a child, helpless, fully, completely dependent. It's almost like, what does the man do? What is the man's role? Yes, because she's doing so much to take care of the man. So I think in that part, she had to agree with the status quo, so give her daughter the tools for survival. When we come to Sembena Osman, his feminism is completely up the notch, because even as men incite Sire Kole's husband to flog her in public and she's there being beaten, you can see the society actually divided in two. There are those who are cheering her not to recant, and the men are telling her, pronounce the word so that the mullah ends. But she refuses. And you can see the two teams pitting each other and cheering her up. Eventually, even Sire himself decides please recant so that I stop beating you. And finally, he decides nobody is going to touch my wife when she refuses to recant. And the entire village begins to becomes empowered. They disarm the women who are the ones who perpetuate the salindana, who are the women who do the act of really cutting, and they make them surrender their tools. So in Sembene, I think Sembene is giving us the picture of African feminism, where it's not the man who is the enemy. The men at the end come together with the women to unite together to correct this evil, to end it, because it's not beneficial. They've lost so many children through death because of overbleeding, or even the children who decided to commit suicide and just die. Yeah, so I think he is a male feminist who is bringing, really affirming the African feminism, where men and women work together to better the society. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Aliu, did you have any comments in response to Dr. Mwamzandi's question, which again is?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I do. I think, like I said, the whole philosophy and the wisdom and the belief of the House of Society revolves around the number range of 1 to 10. If you can see, after 10, like I said, we start repeating ourselves. We say 10 and 1, 10 and 2, up to 19. Fortunately or unfortunately, the word 20 comes from Arabic. It's Ishrin or Ashrin, just like any Swahili speaking can know. Ishrin, any Arabic speaking person can know. Ashrin means 20. So it is 21, 22, up to 30 and 40. So 30 is Arabic, Talatin, 40 is Arabic, Arba'in, 50 is Arabic, Hamsin, 60 is Arabic. So that is why the philosophy of Hausa begins from 1 to 10. Any other thing comes from, it's a foreign material, it's a foreign counting. We only use it due to contact direct or indirectly with these societies. So that is why every person is saying, I start from 1 to 10. There is one saying which says, my son, one son is equivalent to 10, which means that one son is his usefulness, his role in the society is more than 10. So every other thing is 1 to 10. So any other counting apart from 10 is either repetition or is a foreign counting word we borrow. So I don't know whether I'm making some sense, Dr. Mwazandi. I don't know, do you hear me?
My question was whether you said from 20, that from 11 Goma, you can delete, you
yes.
can, you may not say Goma.
Optional, yes.
You just say
Sha.
And what about 20? Can you also say you must repeat Ishirin?
No. Because it is not compounded. It is only one word. If you look at 11 is Goma, Sha, there are string of words. But 20 means Ashirin, just one word. So
what about 21?
And it's not
can
repetition.
You say Sha'aya? I mean, can you just
okay.
say Sha'aya?
21, you can say Ishirin, means Ishirin, 20, and 1. Do you get me? And then if you go to 30, you say Talatin, and you want to Talatin the air, you say Talatin, and Talatin the air, 30 plus 1, or 30 and 1.
Okay, got it.
It goes on until you reach 100, and that is where we have an indigenous word. And you reach 1,000, we have, but in between, there are a lot of foreign borrowings from other languages.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
We have time for maybe one more question, if there is one final question in the room.
Rose Lugano, if I may ask you, if I may ask you about Mwanakupona, do you think that her writing, the way she wrote, Do you see other women writing now in a similar format, or is there some bold and quite different way of writing other than looking at the moral aspect of literature or of writing?
So writing in Swahili cultures or poetry or just any genre? You can hear me?
Okay.
Okay, so I'm asking, is it writing in Swahili literary tradition or women are writing, women have written about these issues and they have changed the position of what Mwanakupona wrote in 1860 concerning women, empowering them. And so a lot of them are contend with the idea of Mwanakupona and what she advises about women, subordinating themselves so much that their life in heaven, that the man has so much power over life here on earth and over their lives in heaven too. Yeah, so there are many who are writing to contradict that, to either correct it or to contest it. For example, I would think, if I think of Solonga itself, there is polygamy there, which is sanctioned by the Islamic tradition. But what is Mariam Abba talking about in Solonga? She's contending with it. So even in Swahili literature, there are people who are writing to contend or to change the position or to empower women and to change the positions that were adopted then, because the societies were so patriarchal. But now with societies having changed, the position of women has changed too. So people are writing in accordance with the status of women today. I hope I answered your question.
We have one last comment from Ms. Azevedo.
No, it's just to say that as I wrote to Mr. Moaca in the chat, we have Carolina Maria de Jesus and Conceição Evaristo, two Black writers here in Brazil, that in her books we can find the Portuguese, the written Portuguese. And it's a problem here because, for example, at school, we have problems to bring these books. We face problems in our society to teach this kind of art, this kind of language at schools, because they are writers, they are poor women, they come from a poor reality, and their book shows this reality to Brazilians. So in her books we can find this. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for your attendance. And I want to express my gratitude for all of your really fantastic research, which highlights that literature, language, form, these are all vehicles for disrupting the dominance of Western cultural, philosophical, and ideological forms. And that a close attention to the structure of these linguistic forms, these literary forms, reveals, as Dr. Anya Chibelu really highlighted in her presentation, the ways that other kinds of philosophies and cultural forms and practices are encoded within them. Thank you so much for your time and attention, everyone, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Have a great morning.
Thank you, Perl.
Thank you. Thank you for coming and for inviting me.
It was great to have you. So let's move to the next panel, which is due to start actually now.
So, okay. Bye, guys.
I think there's a different link for the next panel, so we may need to exit this meeting.
Yes, that's what I wanted to say. Yeah, bye.
Bye. Have a good morning, everyone.
Yeah,